What is the future of process improvement? Is it simply AI and automations? And what are some of the things that we can learn from these large companies operating out there that may be at the cutting edge of some new technology? I'm Amanda Zimmerman, and I'm leading this series Unstuck, where we're focused on helping you get your process improvement winning instead of spinning. So, this first piece of content that we've been putting on for you has been really focused on looking back as well as looking forward. So, what are the trends that we could see in the past that maybe give us an idea of where we're going? And in this first section, we're doing that with this first section of content so that we can start asking that question of when we design our process improvement team, how can we make it as resilient as possible? How can we have confidence that it's going to succeed today and into the future? And so, in today's session, what we're going to do is look deeper at process improvement and what that future looks like for it. In past episodes, what we've done is we've talked a little bit about a company called Bell Labs. Now, Bell Labs in the early 1900s was very well known across the United States, one of the largest monopolies that the United States has ever had. And we can look to them because they actually created a lot of the early foundations of process improvement that we then saw go all over the world, be built upon, adapted, adjusted, so that we have these quality and lean programs that we think of today. All of those, we can trace those roots back to Bell Labs, to Hawthorne, and see how those things got started. Now, Bell Labs had some qualities that helped contribute to its ability to create this foundation for process improvement. First, they were a monopoly, which means that they were able to dominate their market and make decisions that weren't necessarily always the best for the consumer, but allowed them to be as dynamic as possible. There were a lot of good problems out there. So they had a lot of good problems that they could tackle. And then as a monopoly, they had the money to go after the research and things that they needed to go after. At the same time, the solutions to those problems were not simple, they were complex and new and innovative. So they had to find new ways, not just of creating these items, of inventing them, but of assembling them and creating them for mass production because they had a high volume of units that they were actually making. There was urgency present as there was a war going on off and on through the early 1900s. So there were times where there was a lot of urgency to see these changes come, which also meant that the items that they created had to be durable. Sometimes they had to be durable because the expectation was they lasted for 40 years. Sometimes they had to be durable because they were going to war. And one of the things that I think is really significant about these qualities that Bell Labs created was they had a lot of space for creativity. So they valued that space for creativity. And as a monopoly, they had the money to fund it. So let's think then about some of the largest organizations today. And we're primarily going to look at the US. So the largest organizations in the US, or maybe the most influential in the US. And let's think about some of the trends that we can see with those. So, first off, I just want to take a look at really a high level, looking at some of these organizations and seeing the types of tools that they're using. So, what we can see just looking at job descriptions, just looking online at different resources that they have out there, we can start to see some of the structured problem solving tools and root cause analysis tools that they're using really frequently, which tells us, hey, these organizations, these large organizations are all using some form of process improvement. At Google, we see a strong reliance on PDCA. At Amazon, Kaizen. Apple is using DMAIC and A3, NVIDIA 8D, and Tesla, we can see the PFMEAs is quite essential to the work that they're doing. And so it's really interesting to see this because this says that these organizations see value in process improvement, in this incremental improvement over time, even as they're having these huge innovations. This doesn't necessarily mean that in the future, these are going to be the frameworks that they use to manage those innovations, to get quality out of those innovations. And that's really what we want to delve into a little bit more. So let's look at some of the other trends that we can see. So that first one, they all use it. They all use process improvement or quality or Lean Six Sigma in some capacity. Now there are some trends that we can see here, which we can see Nvidia and Amazon, where they actually have physical products. We can see that they use pretty traditional Lean Six Sigma manufacturing approaches to their work. So that's interesting to note. That's something that as we see these innovations and changes, it'll be interesting to see if that's impacted, because that's a space that maybe hasn't had as much growth or change over the last 50 or 60 years as moving lean manufacturing ideas into service, right? Which has been a lot of adjustments and changes to those tools. Another trend that we see is that there's a lot of new frameworks out there to solve problems. So some of those popular ones might be human-centered design or agile or big data. All of these are out there to help either visualize the data so that we can make decisions off of it, to help get the customer more at the center of everything that we're doing, or to manage our work in smaller increments so we can actually see value faster. So, all of these frameworks and methodologies that are starting to develop as we dig into them, what you'll see if you have that Lean Six Sigma or process improvement mind is you'll see pieces of all the things that you already know and learn, right? So you may see pieces of waste identification or pull systems or that definition of what value is in the eyes of our customers, right? So these tools can be helpful to us to learn and add to our tool set. But in the same way, these are places that maybe they're not called lean, but someone with process improvement experience could go into those roles and actually have a lot of experience and background to be able to hit the ground running. Another trend that we see, or that we should be thinking about, because now we're starting to move more into a future mindset than kind of looking at what is happening today. As I looked through these different topics and tried to understand a little bit more about what could we consider quality in the future or process improvement in the future, problem solving in the future, I had to kind of take a moment and maybe just turn something in my brain where I changed the way that I thought about applying quality. So applying it for manufacturing is pretty obvious. We can see the product. In service, it can be harder because the product isn't often tangible, and that takes some adjustment. But I think that there's one more leap that we can take today, which is actually thinking about these very intangible electronic things that we're doing, such as search results, such as algorithms. So, what is quality in those spaces? How are we defining quality? Right? How can we apply the tools that we know in Lean and Six Sigma to these spaces, right? To make sure that our algorithm is at a high enough level of quality that we can actually meet the needs of our customers. So I think to me, this was probably the most impactful um, thought exercise in this research, was just taking a minute and thinking about, if we extend this to the newest innovations like AI, we're talking about what is the quality of the AI results. Is there a framework? Is there a tool that we can use? Can we use root cause analysis or FMEAs to attack some of those questions around quality? Is it going to be beneficial for us to do that? Or are there going to be tools in the future that maybe give us a report for us to be able to digest and then make some of those decisions? Right? So it's real interesting thinking about quality, taking it even further, that quality, that reliability of our software systems and all of the things that they use to make decisions. And the final trend that I really saw, that I've been mulling over for several weeks, I think, is seeing this renaissance of productivity and cost cutting. So I was really having a hard time maybe consuming or understanding this new definition of efficiency that has been pushed out across the United States. And I think for me, the light bulb went off this week, and I realized what we're really talking about is productivity. And not even necessarily always productivity. Sometimes it's just cost cutting. And this is really similar to what we may have seen in the 1980s, where there was this shift where we said, hey, we have to compete. How are we going to be able to compete? We have to become more productive. And so this is where, as we look at efficiency and effectiveness, we have to find or decide what that right balance is. So I think while this is a short term trend, this focus on maybe cost cutting and productivity, labeled maybe as efficiency, we still need to recognize that this maybe 5 or 10 year trend that's out there is going to have a big impact on the work that we do. It also may erode some of the focus on people. So we talked before about the monopoly, right? When we have that monopoly, they don't have to be as flexible to the consumer as if they were in a really competitive market, right? So, in this space where we have maybe this focus, we may see that people are less important in that formula than we maybe would prefer. So let's just bring this all together, not just to draw some conclusions here, but also to talk about, well, what are some decisions that you can make today so that you can decide what's next for you, what looks good for you. So, first off, is that future problem solving frameworks and quality programs will probably be branded differently, but they're going to be using the same concepts, right? So for you, the best thing isn't to say, oh, I'm not doing lean, I'm not doing Six Sigma, these things aren't valuable anymore. But it's really to understand these at a deeper level, that you understand the intent of these tools, that you understand why you're using process improvement or problem solving, and how to adapt them to a variety of situations. So if you get in that meeting about making that algorithm a higher level of quality or putting the user at the center of everything that you design, you can translate that in your mind saying, okay, we're going to do a root cause analysis activity. Should we do a fishbone? Should we do an FMEA? Okay, we're going to define what value is. How can we see value in this example? Right? The best thing for you is really to understand how you can adapt those tools. The second conclusion I think that we can draw is that we are going to have to think differently about our quality and reliability problems. So, when we start talking about quality and reliability, we need to expand, I don't think the definition, but we need to expand our mind to wrap around places that before we may have said, oh, that's not really process improvement, right? So I tend to be somebody that applies process improvement everywhere, at home and everywhere. So I challenge myself often to say, how can I go at this in a structured problem solving way? How can I do root cause analysis? And I think we're going to have to start having those conversations and looking at those problems with that same lens, even if they're quite different than problems we've seen in the past. And that's going to be an adjustment. And there'll probably be those new frameworks that come up to help build that gap, right? To help address that gap. But you'll know the tools, so you'll be all right. And then that third piece is that short term, right? So those are really like long term issues. In the short term, I do see that there's going to be a push for productivity, like maybe in the 1980s. So we may see niches where customer or employee isn't quite valued or focused on, as we may have learned in our Greenbelt courses. There's a lot that we can do there, though, as well, right? So we can stay up to date on AI and automation, which is a big piece of how they expect to achieve these productivity gains. So, as a continuous improvement professional, we can try to stay up on these trends so that we can offer those services to our clients. You can also look at these different niches and say, is this the space I want to play? So, do you want to work for an organization that prioritizes profits over people or not? And you can choose to either take those jobs or work in those spaces or not. And finally, if you haven't done it yet, I think a really great video to watch here is If Japan Can, Why Can't We? Now, I know as a history person, I push this video maybe too much and people give me some pushback on it. But I think actually right now there's some really interesting parallels that you can see with how Deming broke down things at his time versus how maybe we're viewing things today. So might be able to see a little bit of history repeating ourselves there. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you checking out Unstuck, seeing what this series has for you. As I said, this first section was all about just looking back at the past, as well as getting some perspective on what that future might look like. And then what we're going to do next is we're going to go into some of the toxic behaviors, some of the things that could kill your program that are out there, right? So we call those the 4 cardinal sins of process improvement. So that's what we're going to talk about next, are those 4 cardinal sins that could kill your program, that are toxic to your program. And that'll be our next session that we put up. Thank you so much for listening and have a wonderful day.